In this episode of the Digital Trailblazer podcast, we're going to talk all about the Instagram algorithm and bots and AI and whether it's even possible to hack the algorithm or beat the algorithm in any way. So this is going to be a really interesting episode. Stay tuned.
If you want to build a legitimate, profitable online business without shiny objects, without the hypey gimmicks, and without the stress and overwhelm, if you want to make more money without having to be present online all day, every day, pumping out content that nobody sees and hustling DMs to generate leads and sales, then this is the place for you. Welcome to the Digital Trailblazer podcast, your online business university, where you'll learn how ordinary people start from ground zero with no influence, no email list or audience to sell to, and no business or marketing experience, and go from working 9-to-5 jobs to building successful 6- and 7-figure online businesses and all the steps in between. Learn the strategies that worked and what didn't. Learn the mistakes that they made and how to avoid them, and then learn their plans for scaling their businesses and taking things to the next level. All so that you can build your business faster and easier and make more money without sacrificing the things that are important to you in your life. I'm your host, Leah Ray Getz, and with me is my husband, Todd. Now, let's get to it with today's guest.
Welcome, everybody. I am Todd Getz, your host of the Digital Trailblazer podcast, and with me is Tim O'Hearn. Tim, you have a really interesting past and a lot of similarities to what my wife and I have done on social media with some of the things that we've tried to do and tried to hack the algorithm back in the day. And you've done a lot of research and you've found a lot of interesting things, I think. So this is going to be a great episode. Why don't you just introduce yourself to our audience? Tell them a little bit about what you do, your history, and what you're all about.
Thanks for the introduction, Todd. My name is Tim O'Hearn. I'm a software engineer who wrote the book Framed, A Villain's Perspective on Social Media. Framed is my account of growing up with the internet, learning how to program, and then breaking the rules on platforms like Instagram, generating hundreds of thousands of dollars and millions of followers for my customers. The final part of the book deals with all the effects of some of the things that I did and some of the practices that bubbled up throughout the early 2000s into the 2010s and now into the 2020s. So it's a book about growing up with the internet, appreciating what it was, and kind of reflecting on the ugly mess that it's become today.
Yeah, and it's so interesting because when we talked before this episode, we were kind of discussing different tactics that we use to grow social media accounts and how that's changed over the years and different ways you can kind of manipulate that early on and how that's changed over the years. And even now, there's people who are talking about hacking the algorithm, beating the algorithm, how to go viral, and all this stuff. Some of the promises, I think, maybe have some merit to it. Others, maybe not so much. Why don't you kind of tell us right now, are there ways that we can beat the algorithm or manipulate it? Or what can we do to kind of get that edge over the competition, to grow an account, to build a following, to build an online business? Is there anything we can even do?
Generally speaking, I am cynical about what it means to beat the algorithm in 2025. And my stance is that many people trying to sell a guide or a course on how to do it probably don't know any better than a guy off the street. The truth is that no outsider can fully understand what the algorithm, and in this case, we mean a feed algorithm, which has to do with recommendations and information retrieval. The average person can't understand that because they are not the software engineer having designed it. What I provide in my book is this two-pronged approach where I was someone who violated Instagram's terms to get my customers more visibility via that algorithm. And then later, I worked at a social media startup where I built one of the algorithms. So I actually built a feed and I thought about how to make users more stickier and also more likely to use the app for longer periods of time. So when we talk about beating the algorithm today, a lot of the advice starts to feel generic, or it starts to feel almost as if it's generated by AI. I think that one of the truest things, which has been around for more than a decade, is that good content still does win. But the controversial part of it is that good now often means attention grabbing. And there are certain content creators out there who do not create content that is as attention grabbing as a sports highlight reel, a video of a car crash. You know, there are violence. There are just so many things that grab your attention when in actuality, we might be overlooking some of the much higher quality stuff that just is not as snappy.
Yeah. Well, and when I think about the things that sometimes show up in my timeline, and I look at the headline that's on there or the text that's on the thumbnail, and the thing that's being said, and a lot of it is sports related headlines or news and politics, and the headline is something so sensational. And then when you get into it, it's very far from the truth. For example, WNBA Caitlin Clark. That's something that's been very popular for the last year. And there'll be a headline, something like Caitlin Clark gets in a fist fight with a ref or something like that. That's not a real headline, but something like that. And then you click on the video and it was just her and the ref maybe had a little argument or tiff or there was a missed call and that was it. And there's so much of that out there. And I get so sick of it in my timeline that I'm starting to report the stuff now. I don't want to see the channel in my feed anymore. Is that what we have to resort to now in order to get the clicks and the attention? Or how can we still play within the rules and grow a social media account? Are there ways to do that and not have to be so clickbaity?
Yeah, I believe there still are ways to do it. And you've probably seen this a lot recently with things like newsletters that have been coming up. When you see people on Beehive or other types of like Substack newsletters, there's actually a lot of high quality content and people who voluntarily pay to subscribe to some of these creators. So a lot of times it's taking an audience away from the mainstream feed sites, even like Twitter, like Facebook, of course, and taking it more to newsletter-based sites, which kind of incentivize longer reads and not just clicking through pictures. I feel that that's one of the absolute best ways to both partition an audience and also grow it as well.
So I've never heard of Beehive. What is that? I've heard of Substack.
I would say that a lot of this, you can think about MailChimp, which is probably one of the original. It's like an email service provider where you can say, hey, I have a newsletter, I have some type of template. I'm going to send out, likely less than 1,000 words to some audience that's managed on the platform. Substack took this to the next level in that they integrated subscriptions and that they also and meaning tiers of membership. And they also made for very pretty website displays. So back in the day on MailChimp, of course, you could have some basic website, but there was this onus of okay, you have to create a WordPress site and then you link it and you sync the feed with your new mailing list. And it was a lot of effort for someone who wasn't web native and who didn't want to create a WordPress site. What Substack really helped to do was provide the website as well as the mailing platform and as well as the membership and payment part of it too. So a lot of people said, hey, this is much more streamlined. And then within Substack, WordPress is just a platform for websites, but Substack is just for newsletters. And so their recommendations of saying, hey, if you like this newsletter, here are 5 more you might really like. They are some of the best recommendations you can find on the internet today. I truly believe that. Beehive is very similar to Substack, except you would say it's a little bit more of a startup-y approach where they're, looking at different realms of customer acquisition. They make it easier to run ads in your newsletter and whatnot, but a pretty similar concept.
Now, as far as all the promises out there about going viral and hacking the algorithm and all things like this, there's still things floating around there on the internet and on YouTube. And some of it's very old information, but things like paying for likes or paying for followers and things like that. First of all, how did that work in the past? And is there a way to get it to work now?
Any type of social boosting where you can exchange dollar bills for follower headcount is violating the terms of service of any platform that it's on. It's been ruled a type of fraud here in the United States. And that's what's caused many of the resellers, as they were called, to move offshore, to move to other countries. Of course, you can still buy fake followers. You can buy fake streams. I've encountered podcast hosts who buy fake metrics as well. So the point is that there's still this pressure now, if not a greater pressure now, to buy these things to show social proof and to stand out from the crowd. So the temptation is there and the services still exist. And I would say if you're able to move to Pakistan and run one of these reselling operations, you can probably make a good amount of money. But the problem is that when you're purchasing these followers, they might have the effect on someone who takes a quick glance at your profile and says, oh, whoa, Todd has 1 million followers. That's impressive. But anyone who's going to take the time to scrutinize what's actually going on and seeing engagement rates and seeing comments and seeing actual human measures of intimacy and connection, they'll realize that it's a fake And that might actually disadvantage you. There's a newer way of thinking in that many platforms under the hood, they will actually disincentivize this type of behavior by saying, oh, your engagement rate is so low that it's actually suspicious. So we're going to limit your exposure in your own feed. Yeah, so that actually happens to people. I wouldn't say it's well documented, but alleged, especially on Instagram.
So is this what people would call a shadow ban?
It's a form of it, yeah. A shadow ban is really any type of algorithmic restriction that you aren't immediately notified of. So a traditional ban, you get a message and it's like, hey, your account has been terminated. And for most people, that might like be the worst day of your life. It's like you feel it in your heart, and immediately as your pulse increases, you're trying to figure out, where's the customer support number? Who do I email? Who do I have to threaten to get my account back? And the crazy thing is that this causes such a huge human cost to large platforms that they kind of decided, we don't need to ban people. We just need to silence them and make them think that they're still playing. I think one of the metaphors that I've given on another talk has been, it's like going and playing video games at your cousin's house, and you're playing multiplayer. You have the controller, you got the buttons, you think you know which screen is yours on the split screen. And then after the game is finished, you realize your controller wasn't even plugged in. That's exactly the connection I'd make between a shadow ban and what we're talking about here. There are many different ways that a shadow ban, shadow restriction, whatever you want to call it, could be implemented. It also could be what words you use. And maybe you would say, hey, you get bucketed into this bucket and suddenly your reach is lower. But if you use this set of words, your reach is higher. It's very complicated and also pretty nefarious.
Yeah, well, and I can almost see a benefit to the social media companies as well, because if they start removing people from their platforms, number one, I mean, people are going to talk about it on the internet and it's going to have a negative effect. Everybody's complaining about getting banned and things like that. But the other thing is that if you decrease the number of users on your platform, that also has an effect on advertising dollars and things like that whenever you're looking at being profitable. So, I mean, it's almost to their benefit to have some bot users on there just to kind of artificially inflate how big the platform is. It's like just giving the fake controller to the kid while you're playing the game. If you're a parent, you've probably done this before if you're a dad. I know I've done that before to my kids. Give them one of a controller that's not even plugged in and I'm playing and they think they're playing too. So yeah, the shadow bans are definitely a thing. What about if you've been in the industry more than 6 or 7 years, you probably have heard about this. Mass Planner, Jarvee, things like that. You could use these programs to basically run your social media account from your computer. And for example, one way to grow a social media account would be to do a follow for follow. So on platforms like Instagram, Twitter, those are two of the popular ones where you could follow somebody and it was kind of customary for them to follow you back when you followed them. And that was one way to get followers. But then you could also program them to automatically like some of the posts, to automatically comment on some of the posts. You could program it to even post for you. You could do some of these things with the software and it was automated and you could do it not just for one profile, but for multiple profiles. Does anything like that work anymore?
I'm really glad that you brought these up because as far as the internet is concerned, Mass Planner and Jarvee have both been erased from the internet. So the only way you could know is if you were someone who used them. Mass Planner, I believe, was shut down in, I think, May of 2017. And then Jarvee ceased operations probably around 2019. That was more of like a self-contained and black hat world type program. For people like me and you, so let's say before I got into the industry, but for someone who just had a small client list and a couple accounts that I was looking to promote, these tools made you feel like you were God. These tools were so powerful in how quickly you could navigate, you could make these connections, and you could watch the followers, likes, comments, and even direct messages pile in, even if your account quality wasn't particularly high. But in the early days there, this was also aided by the fact that the daily restrictions on how many actions you could take were extremely high. So you think if it was unlimited, you could easily take tens of thousands of actions per day. The actual limit was maybe about 1,000. Quickly lowered to 500, quickly lowered to 300, which it then stayed at for over a year. But even if you're sending out 300 follow requests per day, you have to think a decent number of those people are going to follow you back. And that's like a really, really powerful software system. And back then they also were pretty cheap. As far as whether they exist today, The interesting part is that all of the foundational programming methods, so all of the API methods that a programmer like me could use to say, log into the account, query the friends list, query the friends of the friends, query the pictures of friend number one, like one of them, etc. All of these capabilities still exist because they're still there in the Instagram app. They're still there on Twitter. But the issue and why we don't see these programs at least being advertised is that Instagram and other large tech companies have made it extremely difficult to scale. And that's the biggest problem. They don't really care if it's me or you running this on our browser. They do care when we have 100 accounts running in different proxy, like IP addresses in the cloud, just hammering their servers and causing a nuisance, causing irritating actual human users on the platforms. So these programs still do exist. It's still possible for a programmer to create one from scratch. But what I call the golden era of Instagress to Mass Planner, finally to Gram Multi-Tool 2 and Jarvie no longer exists as we once knew it.
So even doing that stuff manually, like if you were to manually do the follow unfollow thing, is that something you could do to grow an account, or would it just not be worth it if it's a manual process that you can only do with one account?
The truth is that follow unfollow, and this is the official name of the algorithm. It means you follow people, and then after some amount of time, you will unfollow them because presumably you'll hit a follower cap, or you just want to keep your ratio in bounds. Follow unfollow has been captured by academics, by researchers from Meta and from the University of California, San Diego. In their research paper, they prove that the rate of reciprocation for a follow, to get a follow back, was somewhere between 8 and 12%, which, if you can remember how things used to work for you, I personally had thousands of customers. I'd say about 10% was pretty accurate. So the truth is, Todd, that even today, if I was to do that manually, and maybe I had a little bit of better intuition of, who might follow me back and who might not, follow and follow is still completely valid. On every single social media platform, this type of action that begs for reciprocity, whether it's follow for follow, comment for comment, like for like, message for message, I would say there's roughly a 10% chance that you're going to get something reciprocated there. And it's incredibly powerful.
Interesting. Now, is it within the terms of service for any of these companies to do that with an automated software?
That's where it gets tricky. On every platform, it's against the terms of use. Broadly, they restrict any type of automated activity, anything that could cause a nuisance. And also on like Meta products, specifically anything that could artificially coerce or boost your follower counts. So it's against the rules, but you'd have to think that if you were to just hire someone to use your phone all day and tap, 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 there's pretty much no way to catch that. So you're able to get away with it. The issue is that if you were to try to start a business to do it, it would involve you either having to purchase 100 phones, 100 data plans, and a couple people to tap, because running it all in the cloud is too easy to be detected, and it wouldn't work.
And even using proxies wouldn't work.
Yeah. So in that research paper, it was called Following Their Footsteps. And the main way that they found they could follow the footsteps of people like me was addressing like proxy subnets and proxy quality. So what they were doing was kind of finding similarities in user agents and different proxies and realizing that there were millions and millions of bots on the platform. So you could have some success if you use like rotating mobile proxies, but these are very expensive. And over time, because they're rotating, you don't own them. So somebody else is renting it out to do something shady as well. The authority score, the trust score goes down. And that's why there's almost nobody operating in this space these days.
Wow. Just fascinating. So if you are looking to grow a social media account, as far as automation or any of these types of engagement, are there any ways to do it in a leveraged way? Or are we strictly relying now on just, you have to create good content that is click-worthy and grabs people's attention? Like, is that the only thing we're left with now? Or if you have that hacker mentality at all, is there any way that we could leverage that a little bit better?
This is a good question. And I would say that there are a few ways that you could kind of pierce this idea of it being impenetrable to the hacker ethos. And a lot of it doesn't come from what you can automate as far as your actions, but how you can leverage all of the data available that's been gained, that's been found in automated ways and obviously turned over by like data processing systems to figure out things like what is the best time to post, or who are the actual people in my niche. So if I'm thinking about myself, what would help me grow my accounts, for example, I try to sell my book to people, I would want to find authors who are similar to me or who have similar audiences. And what's gotten significantly better compared to 2018 or 2019 is how well you can target and how well you can do this type of market research, because there are these massive operations mining the data, extracting insights from the data. So saying who's out there, and then also thinking about periods of when have past posts had the most success. And I think we see that on LinkedIn now, where it's a little bit easier to automate. You see that people have auto repliers, auto commenters. And I think a lot of those could be further optimized for the absolute best time to send them, the absolute best time and place to tag a certain person. So yeah, it's still out there, but to just do this this daily grind of like, okay, scrape these pictures like this, like that, get the return, that's much more difficult.
Well, and to that point, there are, like you said, you could do an auto reply. As far as I know, within the terms of service that you could have something like ManyChat, or even I think Go High Level has some capability to do this as well. When somebody comments on a post, you can have an automatic reply come in and reply to that.
It depends on the platform. On Instagram, their terms have changed. So after enough time had passed, they became very, very strict on DMs. My understanding is that now a lot of things have been lifted, and there's been a bit of a reprieve as far as what we do specifically for replies and one-on-one relationships. And on LinkedIn, yeah. The funny thing is that a lot of automation is still against the terms on LinkedIn, but for whatever reason, LinkedIn just doesn't have that much of a bot spam problem, because every account that's using automation at the end of the day is a real person. And it just seems like LinkedIn doesn't care as much, which I find quite funny.
The way I understand, because we've had people talk about LinkedIn on this show as well, and they use some automation. I think part of it is that there's like some subscription level in LinkedIn where they give you access to that data. And then I think they use some sort of automation to come up with a list of people that they want to connect with. And then they send those connections out. So there is some level of automation that seems like, as long as you're using it in the right way and not in a spammy way, you can get away with.
Yes, I think that's an important phrase to use, like getting away with it. I think it's Sales Navigator on LinkedIn is maybe the high. Yeah. And I've seen some of these tools. I've actually had people reach out to me and say, hey, like, why don't we build a business on top of, and I'm like, nope, not for me. But the point is that a lot of the legal precedents that were raised in the Instagram space, there was also a major court case involving LinkedIn and a company that built a service on top of scraped LinkedIn data. And essentially, like the company shut down and they settled with LinkedIn out of court. So I think what we're seeing is that because people are using it for their own origination, their own lead prospecting purposes, they're not just bucketing it all and then selling it on the black market, that there is a little bit more flexibility there. I wonder how long it'll last for.
Yeah. Well, and that kind of brings me to my next point, is that if you use any of these tactics in the past, I think from what we found is that it works for a little while and then it's not sustainable. And then once your account gets flagged as one of those bot accounts, or as an account that's been shadow banned, or an account that's been abusing or not using the platform in a way that they want you to, it's game over for that account. You're not going to regain that reputation that you want to build a business, and you're probably going to have to start a brand new account and hope that they don't catch you again.
That visibility or lack thereof is very concerning, especially when you're on a platform like LinkedIn, where you're thinking, am I going to give all of this up, log out, create a new account, do a new identity verification, and hope that a couple weeks from now, I get back to what I consider sufficient exposure for each one of my posts? It's a really, really tenuous situation that nobody wants to be put in. But I have had other hosts say, hey, I was doing like this practice, I was using this tool, and they feel that they've been shadow banned on LinkedIn. So what you're saying is exactly right. There's a growing There's a huge swath of people who have been affected by this. But when you Google search it, who are you going to find? It's not people like me. You're going to find people who are going to try to get you to pay probably hundreds, if not thousands of dollars for something that they cannot guarantee that it works. There's no way to know that your account is flagged. You can only use some statistical reasoning based on what you've seen in the past. Like, that's the thing. What are you going to do? You're going to sue them? You're going to call like the attorney general? There's really no reprieve. And it is like, it's painful to be silenced in that way.
Now, what about leveraging AI to create your content? Because I know from what I've heard about, for example, if you're using AI to create blog posts and things like that, I've heard from some people that they think that Google can identify AI created content and they penalize that. Does that exist at all on social media? Like if you're using AI to create a post on Facebook or to write your text for an Instagram post, or if you're using AI generated images, does that affect the algorithm at all on Instagram or Facebook or anything like that?
Your basis point here of Google and how this affects SEO is indeed well documented. And it's been around for so long. I mean, you and I can remember, but kids these days don't. In that before we had AI, we had a practice called content spinning. And if you look at Black Hat World, which is a Black Hat SEO forum, you'll see people offering the service of taking content, spinning it, meaning finding like different types of synonyms for words and changing the structure, but keeping most of the keywords there, with the idea that this can gradually boost the search engine rank of a website. So that was a practice that is probably 20 years old at this point, that Google is on the record of saying, do not do this. This is a black hat practice. We now are quite sure that these same types of detection methods are being employed for AI. To what extent, like, I don't know. I don't really pay attention to like Google Analytics news these days, but I think it's right on. As far as what this has to do with social media, like it's just much darker because we have to think about, we're not fooling search. We're just fooling like people who happen to encounter our content anyway. And maybe we're hoping by extension we could fool search. But one thing that really bothers me is that there are probably people who would not otherwise post if not for AI. If they couldn't have the confidence given to them by AI tools or the skills, for example, if like a photo being generated that nobody could make themselves, maybe they wouldn't post at all. And that's really the existential problem for social media sites. It's that not that they might ever run out of users, because they won't. It's that they might run out of creators. And one way they can stem creators falling off is to say, hey, you know what? Post your AI slop. And of course, there's not a banner ad saying this, but the directive, I think, is quite clear to me, where sites that clearly don't want it, sites that see themselves as bastions of human curated knowledge, such as Stack Overflow, create things in their terms of use that say, do not use AI. And then they have detectors and they say, nope, this is AI. On other communities, I think it's much more questionable, because the balancing act here is probably tilted in favor of people using AI, because there's some percentage of them that would simply not otherwise post content.
Well, and I think AI content can be done in a really creative way that actually adds to the platform. And then I think there's ways where you're using it just to be deceptive or to create a reality or create posts that are not really representative of what your brand or what your business is really like. When I think about the AI content that I see in my timeline that I actually want to see, it's the creative stuff that's entertaining. It's not necessarily the educational stuff. Sometimes maybe, or maybe I'm seeing AI stuff and I don't even realize it. I guess maybe that's the other point I got to think about. But yeah, I think there's ways to use it where it's creative and it's entertaining and it adds to your brand. And there's ways to use it where, you know, it's just junk, right? It's like you said, it's AI slop. Going forward, if there was one piece of advice that you could give people who are trying to start a business or trying to build a business and they want to be able to leverage time as best as possible, but they want to stay within the terms and they don't want to put their accounts in danger, what's a really good piece of advice that you can give to those people?
One sentence would be focus on your craft. Add some more sentences to that. What I mean is that many customers that I had at my business, which I codenamed Shark Social, they were so obsessed with social media success that they forgot the core part of running a business is business success. And in some cases, there's overlap there. Of course, you could have a sales funnel online that leads to sales in your web storefront, or maybe even people come to your physical store. But the point is that if you suck at what you do, or even if you're in the middle, even if you're middling, like you're just not that competitive. And no matter what you do on social media, it's going to be hard to backfill real talent, real excellence. And I think there's this trap where I've called it the expertise trap, but it's really this trap of, okay, you swipe over, now you're on your business account on Instagram. And now as you're scrolling through your feed, you convince yourself that you're performing some type of competitive intelligence check, that you're scoping out the competition, that you're generating ideas about what your next post could be. And my stance is that 90% of that time should actually be spent on the business, on the art, on what makes that person unique, and then worry about representing it on social media or promoting it on social media later. Of course, for the one-man army, this is not easy. And I understand why there's certain periods of the day where, yeah, you're not going to practice your violin at midnight or 1 a.m. In your New York City apartment, and you'd rather scroll on your phone. But by and large, there's been this misplaced importance on it. And I feel that a lot of it does come back to having great content. If you are truly excellent, people will come. And some of this could be developing a personality, developing an aesthetic, developing a circle of friends who support you, or, just fans who support you as well. So that's kind of the one sentence elongated to many, many more to say that my stance is very much outside the realm of social media specific things. And it's more based on what is the kernel of your business, what makes you unique, and what value are you bringing to the world.
Well, Tim, this has been such a fascinating conversation. It brings back a lot of memories from the early days of our business. But if people want to learn more about you, learn more about your book and the things that you wrote in there, and about all the research about social media algorithms, where can they find you? Where can they find your book?
Yeah, Todd, it's been a pleasure to be here today. My book, Framed, A Villain's Perspective on Social Media, can be found on Amazon Kindle as well as paperback, with the audiobook likely coming later this summer. Anyone who's interested in more of my long-form content can find that at tjohern.com. And for my newsletter, it's timohern.beehive.com.
All right. And we will have the links for all of that in the show notes, so be sure to check that out. Tim, thank you so much for being with us today. This is a fascinating conversation. We really appreciate having you on the podcast.
Thank you, Todd.
You've been listening to the Digital Trailblazer podcast. For show notes and information about today's guest, head to digitaltrailblazer.com. Now, if you love this episode, if you got some value, make sure you leave us a review and subscribe. And be sure to share this episode with anyone you know who could use help to build their business. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.